So let's do some question and answer.
Sweet. We got a lot of questions for this segment because
Got that.
obviously it's
I
content
bet.
packed.
Let's do it.
Um, so
Chris, how are they? How's everybody feeling?
I think everyone's feeling good. The chat looks great. So we'll start off with a question from Paul, which he says that when it comes to when you're in a session and you're recording, do you take notes on paper, or do you use a specific app, or do you take it in line on the track itself using the DAW comment function?
Um, Personally, I typically take notes on paper. Um, just because I don't want technology in front of me, and I'm not always the person. I'm less often the person running the DAW. The engineer that's running the DAW will make notes in the computer. It's like I like everybody that's on the production team to make notes. The assistant engineer typically is making notes in a document on his computer, or sometimes we use an app. I mean, I guess I'm saying we use it all. If you're if you're the one person doing everything, do what feels familiar and easy to you and that fits a workflow that is not time consuming. If it's putting comments in the track comment area, go for it. I think that there's a rating system that one of my engineers uses, that you can assign a rating to each individual audio region that's recorded. Um, uh, I make notes on lyric sheets. I make notes in a notebook, scraps of paper. I have a good memory. Just do what works best. I don't know that I have any. There isn't one specific thing. Just be organized, and being organized is different for everybody. So take notes. However you do it, just take notes, and it'll be fine. It'll be something you can refer back to later, and it will be essential to getting a great result.
Great. Now we're going to bring the topic back to something that you had a lot to say about, which was polarity and phase. This is a question from Anthony, and he's asking if you can quickly compare and contrast polarity and phase and distinguish between the two of them.
Okay, polarity is polarity is a switch that gives you that inverts the signal 180 degrees. Okay, so it takes something that's positive and makes it negative, right? Or vice versa. Polarity is um, pushing or pulling the speaker. It's positive or negative amplitude. Um, Phase is sort of everything in between. Um, a phase relationship um, has to do with the distance that two microphones might be from something, and the way that they're collecting the frequencies. Um, uh, if they if one microphone is only collecting low frequencies, and at a certain frequency, let's say 2 kilohertz, it switches over, and that's where this microphone leaves off, and then this microphone picks up, and this is 2K and above. Well, what's going to happen is um, there won't the phase the information, there's no shared information. Okay, so you're not going to hear as much of a phase discrepancy between them. But if they're, as almost all microphones do, they're more full spectrum, they're not going to hear things equally, because they're in different positions. Even if they're the same microphone, they're not going to hear things equally. They're in different positions, they're different distances, and the frequencies will be arriving at different times. Okay, low frequencies will be arriving at a more similar time by the way that it takes them to develop, but high frequencies will be arriving at vastly different times. And so what you get is filtering between those two microphones. And the filtering is a phasing sound. And where, if the polarity is not the same, I hope you can see my hands. Like this, I'm using my hands up to represent positive polarity, and down negative. If they're not the same, well, the frequencies where they are, that they have in common, but are not in agreement because of polarity, will cancel each other out. And so you get this filtering sound. You always have a phase relationship when you have multiple microphones on a source, even if they're right next to each other and they sound different. They're not exactly on top of each other. They're just not all the electronics they're going through, and that's just not. It's impossible for them to be a carbon copy of each other. And because they're not a carbon copy, they combine and detract from each other in a certain way. The farther you get them apart, the more that they filter one another. But it's really severe if you invert the polarity of them, then the phase relationship starts to cancel frequencies. So how do you know if you have a good phase relationship between these two things? If these two microphones are listening to the same thing and they're right next to each other, which they should have the best phase alignment. If I invert one, if they were perfectly in phase with each other and I inverted one, well, what would happen is they would null each other out, and it would all the sound would go away, right? So if you and it's volume dependent as well. If things are perfectly in phase and the polarity is in agreement, when you have two of something, it will get louder. It will get 3 dB louder. So, that's a way to tell how good your phase is by you change your volume relationship of these two things, and it should just get louder. If they're not in agreement, as I turn up the one that's out of polarity with the one that's in polarity, it's like the one that's louder is going to be the dominant sound, and as this out of polarity one comes up, it's going to start to eliminate some of the sound, and this is going to start to get quieter to the point where it goes away. But it's not going to be it's never really a perfect relationship. I know that when I have two guitar mics on a guitar cabinet and they're right next to each other, the sound is really tight and the phase is good when I flip the polarity and I knowingly make the polarity opposite, and the guitar sound almost entirely goes away. Then I know that my phase is good, and then I return it to the same polarity. Okay? Now, you can have two negative polarities or two positive polarities, and it will sound complete, but the sound signature of positive polarity versus negative polarity is different. And that's what I want you to listen to. I want you to listen to things like a kick drum is the easiest thing to see. Pull up a kick drum sample or record a kick drum and observe that the transient is positive before it's negative, and just listen to that, and then flip the polarity so that's the other way around and listen to that, and you will hear a difference. And that's the difference I want you to train your ears to hear. And hopefully that answered the difference between the two and how to evaluate the qualities that they have with that answer.
I think that was a great answer. We're going to switch on to equipment now, which is a question from John, which said, you don't talk about small diaphragm condenser microphones. Do you use them, or you don't use them, or recommend using them?
I don't use them as much, to be honest. I don't know that I have a fantastic explanation for that. I think it's kind of a taste thing. The thing is they don't capture as much low end. They're because it's technically because it's a smaller element, it is more sensitive to high frequencies, because high frequency does not contain, like a high frequency has to be louder. What's the way to explain it? A smaller diaphragm is more easily influenced by higher frequencies, and it's not as influenced by low frequencies. because there's not as much surface area to. I think that's more what it has to do with. There's not as much surface area for the low frequencies to make it respond, and because that it sounds like it's more responsive to high frequencies because the high frequency detail on it is greater. Um, uh, a larger diaphragm microphone has the ability to capture more low frequencies, and so it just is a microphone that I would use more commonly because I'm trying to capture the tone of a source, And now I'm not saying like obviously the difference between putting a pair of small diaphragm condensers over a drum kit versus a couple of large diaphragm condensers is this that the large diaphragm condensers are going to be more responsive to the low end and capture a more full frequency um, picture of the drums. The smaller diaphragm microphones over the drum are not going to be as affected by the low frequencies and are going to be give you more high frequency detail, more mid range. They'll be more responsive to cymbals, and depending on the instrument that you're recording, that might be the call. I mean, instead of having to dump off a lot of low frequency, like let's say we're recording a mandolin, something that a very small acoustic instrument that doesn't have a lot of low frequency energy. Well, maybe I want a large diaphragm to try and draw out as much of that tone, but maybe I don't. Maybe I don't need it in the space that the mandolin is going to fit into the production. And by choosing the small diaphragm microphone that's less sensitive and not going to capture as much low end detail, I'm sort of EQing ahead of the game. And this is a decision that you would make in defining your recording, like being bold and knowing these things, and recording them. I worked on a project where the lead engineer decided to record a female vocalist with a small diaphragm condenser because he felt like it captured the air and detail of her vocal really well. I didn't quite see it that way. I felt like it made it more difficult to control the sibilants, and it just got a little bit harsh at times without having the ability to capture those low frequency details. But he made it work, and that was a choice that he was able to make. I certainly have small diaphragm microphones. I have, I don't know, probably half a dozen of them. I just don't use them that frequently. I used to use them more. It's not something I favor as much. I think also the reason I use them less is because I don't really use analog tape as much anymore. When you recording to the older medium of analog tape, you wanted to record things brighter. You didn't need all the low frequency energy because the tape actually transformed sounds into that kind of exaggerated some low frequencies and kind of added some of that harmonic content. And that over time, as tape ages and you play stuff back and the sound sits on it for a while, the high frequencies dull a little bit. So, I think smaller diaphragm microphones were more used in the analog age than the digital age. Now, if you're recording like bluegrass or stuff that's very acoustic instrument and there's a lot of detail, a lot of high frequencies, a lot of rhythm, a lot of movement, and you're using some tube gear and stuff that kind of warms all that detail up, slows it down a little bit, and you're making kind of a live recording where you are not going to be able to make as many mix moves, EQ moves along the way, or you don't want the low frequency spill from other instruments like the upright bass to be bleeding into the mandolin mic. Well, yeah, the small diaphragm microphone might be better on the mandolin mic, so you're not getting the low end leakage of the bass. So hopefully that's enough of an explanation and some examples of why. I mean, it's just a personal choice thing, and there's no right or wrong. Absolutely not.
That was a great answer. All right. We're gonna now bring up a question on drums.
Yeah.
So, considering that lots of the people attending this workshop all use a home studio, Jeet
Hmm.
asks, will a good quality electronic drum kit that records the data as MIDI be an alternative to miking up an acoustic drum kit?
I'm understanding, Chris. I'm understanding the question to be if you have like a VR kit or like a trigger pads, and you have
Yeah,
good samples. Is that a good alternative to recording an acoustic kit? Is that correct?
I believe that's the question.
Okay, yeah. I mean, sure, man. I mean, it's absolutely. It's there's no right or wrong. I'm not. I think that not that that's an easy proposition to kind of, I mean, you got a lot of moving parts there too. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made. You got to choose the right samples. You got to know how to capture and manage the MIDI. Um, how to set up and execute that way. But there, honestly, if that's the sound that feels great, well, then yeah, do that. I mean, we didn't even touch on it. We didn't even touch on it, and I kind of said that I would. Um, there are even in like rock music or metal music. I mean, very rarely in metal music do you actually hear the sound of the recorded kick drum. They record the kick drum with a lot of attack on it, partially because that's the aesthetic of the music, but because they're going to trigger a sample. There's lots of music where you don't hear a full drum kit, and a lot of it is triggered. You can do it from recording an acoustic. You can do it from recording an acoustic kit and then replacing and layering samples in there. You can record the virtual drums and pick your samples, and then maybe just do a live overdub of cymbals to kind of give it some air and energy. I mean, that's a perfectly fine way. You can record the whole drum kit and then maybe turn your cymbal tracks off, your MIDI information for the cymbal tracks off, and then replace it with real cymbals. Queens of the Stone Age, the record that Dave Grohl played drums on, was it so was it not song? What the heck is it? Songs for the Deaf, or what the heck? I can't think of it. I'm drawing a blank. But I helped set up that recording session, and there were no cymbal mics up. We cut out cardboard cymbals and put them on cymbal stands so Dave could hit the cymbals, like so he could still feel like he was performing and hit stuff. But then went back and overdubbed the cymbals because we won't. The desire was to get a drum sound that was just focused on what the bare bones of the kick and snare was about. Um, uh, the other thing I want to say is that yeah, you can record this. You can record a drum kit and then uh, add samples to the kick and snare and turn the acoustic kick and snare way down, or actually turn them off and use the samples instead, and just use the overhead mic. I've done that on records. You can start with programming. And just you can start with programming. You got like a cool kick and snare sound that you've programmed out for the song, and that's what's going to be. But you want to get that, you want to kind of get that live drummer feel for the whole song or parts of the song. I mean, I've put up just one microphone over the drums and recorded the drummer playing a whole drum pass um, along with the samples. And yeah, it's like there's a little bit of. I mean, of course you're going to hear the full kit in there. And there's going to be a little bit of kick drum bleed, but it kind of, if it's performed the right way and you can kind of manage the editing, it will sound great. So there's no right or wrong. This is you finding your sound. This is you figuring out the production techniques that make you sound unique and individual to yourself. And I mean, honestly, guys, there's so much to do and learn. That's why I'm trying to get you to understand that. I mean, we've talked about a lot of technical things, and in mixing, we'll continue to talk about technical things, but it's really about preparing to be, um, to put yourself in a place where you can experiment and execute and figure out what your sound is.
That's great. So the next question is from Eno. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And it's a question on which headphones do you recommend, and what should people be looking for or listening for when they purchase a pair of headphones for recording and production?
Okay. I wouldn't. I don't have. I mean, I probably have 10 sets of headphones here that, I have a pair of KRKs that I like. I think they're the 8200s. I like them because they sound like the speakers that I like. But I have biodynamics. I have AKGs. We have several different um, uh, kinds of AKGs. I have, oh goodness, I can't even think of all. I have Beats headphones. I use earbuds. Um, it's whatever makes sense. I would say that obviously when you're learning to record your own stuff, that's maybe not the thing to go pick out a pair of headphones. But um, I, I would say that you should, like, in the same way that you should go pick out a pair of speakers. If you can go to a store, a guitar center, or anywhere, and take some music that you're familiar with, or pull up Spotify and just listen to a bunch of music that you're familiar with and you like the sound of, and listen to a bunch of different headphones. I mean, that's probably the best way to pick it. I mean, because really, there's no right or wrong when it comes to headphones or speakers. It's not about. I mean, I can tell you that I think you should pick speakers that don't sound too hyped, that sound kind of flat. And now, what do I mean by that? It's just like they don't it doesn't sound like they're over accentuating the highs and lows, and making things sound all slick. You want a speaker that's gonna make you work hard, and that automatically just doesn't make everything sound great. You want a speaker that makes you work to get a great result. That's why NS10s were so popular, because they're kind of crappy sounding speakers, but they became a standard because if you could get stuff to sound good on those, it would translate. But regardless, what has to happen with a pair of speakers or a pair of headphones is you need to understand what they sound like, how to balance and EQ stuff, and how it's going to translate to other speakers, and you have to like listening to them. Um, it's it's a matter of making a choice that you feel comfortable with, an informed choice, and then learning to navigate, getting used to them, and being able to rely on them. Having a pair of speakers that you can trust and get to know and rely on may be, and this would apply to headphones too, I guess, may be the most important thing that you do, and how you set them up, where you place them. You should Learning to mix on headphones is important, especially in today's world, but you need to learn to mix on speakers first, and always check any work that you do, if you're mixing on headphones, check it on a pair of speakers. I have gotten burned in the past. It was a long time ago, but mixing stuff on headphones and not being 100% familiar with the headphones, and kind of making some. I mean, that's the sound like right on your ears, and does not necessarily. I mean, the technology's gotten better, like the earbuds that we have now. They've figured out how to, port them and get them to sound balanced, and they sound pretty good now. I mean, headphones have come a long, long way, but um, you definitely need to check things on speakers. You can miss some detail, and you need the sound out in space to develop, and sort of being reinforced by different environments, and I mean, like rooms, acoustics, to sort of understand how to balance things. So there's the answer for that.
Great. I think we'll wrap up the Q&A for recording and production on this question, because I think it's going to be a good one for you. And it's from Ito, and he's asking specifically about Buddy Guy's album Blues Singer, which you
Mm-hmm.
won a Grammy for, on how was that recorded, because it's got an amazing sense of intimacy and it sounds very natural and very deep. Do you think it came from the room or the microphones or both?
And the players. It was all recorded all in one room. I was in the room with them. Um, uh, they were in. It was in a large room. It was in a large space, and like the console was in there and the speakers. But I mean, obviously, when I was recording them, I would record, and then I'd listen on the speakers, and then I'd go back to recording on headphones just to monitor things. But we were all in one space. I sort of handpicked all the recording equipment before. Um, some of the gear was rented. The studio didn't have enough of the things that I needed, so I went with a musician friend of mine to the place where the rental gear that I was going to hire it from, and they had like a little setup, and they gave me permission to kind of audition the the different components, and I hand selected the microphones and different components that I thought I needed, and we recorded all in one space. So that's Buddy Guy is sitting on a couch, and I have a vocal mic in front of him, which was like a C12 type of microphone, an AKG C12. The guitar mic, I put an M49, which is a Neumann M49 on him. Um, the other guitar player, which I am drawing a blank on at the moment, his name, I want to say it wasn't JD. Um, Gosh, sorry. Uh, I forget what microphone I had him. I just remember Buddy very clearly because he's the star of the show. But literally, there was a chair next, like there's the couch, and then there was a chair next, like just a couple feet away. He was at sort of like a 90-degree angle to the way Buddy was sitting. So I had, so the microphones were sort of like there's a little bit of rejection from the leakage. There was a drummer who was on the other side of the couch, and I had like little low partitions around him. His name is Jim Keltner, very famous drummer, recorded on tons and tons of records. Very simple drum miking. I would say I probably had 6 total microphones on that drum kit because Jim had some like what you would call toys or different things, and he'd play percussion. So I had a kick drum mic, a snare drum mic, a couple overheads, and then tom mics, and then like kind of a utility mic that I could move around to maybe capture what different percussive things he might be playing, or if I felt like a particular song I needed to highlight a particular drum or like the hi-hat, I'd move my utility mic over there. And then I had upright bass, and the upright bass was a direct, and then a large diaphragm microphone on the sort of near the F hole on the bottom, and then a pencil condenser. I did use a pencil condenser for those of you that were wondering. Around where in the middle, sort of the bottom of the fretboard would be, and I don't remember if I used any ambient mics. I mean, there was enough. It was recorded live, and there was enough leakage that I didn't. You don't need to add room mics because there's a little bit of leakage on everybody's mics or the performances, so you kind of get a sense of space that way. We were all in the room together, and yeah, I mean, we would take several versions of a song. The song might be performed anywhere from 1 to 6, 8 times, and then the producer decided. I wasn't the producer on the record, but the producer decided what takes he wanted to use or what sections of what takes, and it was kind of all cut together. And then Ed Tierney, who's a fantastic, he's a great guy, good friend. Ed mixed the record in Los Angeles after we had recorded and sort of edited it into place.
Great. All right. We'll end off the Q&A with just one more question, and it's going to be on Polarity by Andreas, and he's asking, do I have to deal with any polarity issues when I'm exclusively using just programmed drums, so such as Easy Drummer or Superior Drummer 3, and so on?
Yes, sir. Yep, you do, because chances are you got a 50-50 chance that the polarity's wrong. And I swear to you that half the samples in sample libraries are wrong. Now, wrong. Jacquire says wrong. Everybody else can say right. But the way I told you, the way I explained to you about polarity and the way you might record something, yeah, you got to check I mean, if you're using samples from 2 different sources, you got a 50-50 chance that they don't agree with each other. So yeah, you got to check your samples. When we do programming, I always go through and check the samples and invert them if need be, and make everything in agreement. Or if I'm going to leave it in disagreement, it's a very conscious choice, and I'm not left wondering why I'm struggling to get a punchy, cohesive sound later. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not saying it's wrong to have the initial transient go negative. It's a choice. It's a choice. But I explained to you why, what it does, and where you're going to find inconsistencies with it. And sample libraries are definitely fraught with those recording choices, errors, what have you. But it's definitely something you need to check. But you always need to check your work. Definitely need to check your work. Is that the last question, Chris? Because I probably have a couple other small things I want to say.
Let's just throw in one small question, which is really relevant for the audience, which would be, is from Daniel, and he's asking, what amp emulations do you recommend that are better than a guitar rig? He's looking to get great tones for a modern pop punk style.
Well, it depends on, like, that's a kind of a tricky question, because it depends on to get a great recorded sound through an amp, you need to have experience, equipment, a lot of expensive equipment sometimes. And oftentimes, when you're getting, I mean, we set up sometimes, honestly, we rarely set up just one amp to get a guitar sound. We usually set up a couple. Sometimes we set up a whole bunch of them. I use a guitar. We use a signal splitter to get to multiple amps at the same time. We put multiple microphones on them. Now, this is not your situation necessarily. You can figure out how to do it if you have enough inputs, and you can combine it down. But what we do is we put up, let's say we have 4 amplifiers, put up 6 microphones, bring them up on the recording console, get all the polarities of things in agreement, mic placement, so their phasing is good. We choose different microphones for different amps. We don't put the same microphone on everything. We choose amps that have different sound profiles, different distortion, and then we figure out what blend we want of them, how to balance them together, and then we record them to one track, and we do that by bussing them all down. You can achieve it in a DAW. It's a little bit of a process. It's probably more than I should try and explain. Guitar. I mean, there's a lot of great emulations out there. Sometimes some of the qualities that you'll miss about using only amp sims is that you're going to miss the opportunity for air and certain things. But Universal Audio, I mean, listen, they're not paying me to say this, but I'm a big fan. They have this new box called the Aux, and if you have a head, an amp head, then you can use that box and for cabinets and virtual miking. Joey Sturgis has a lot of really cool high gain amp sims. Universal Audio has some great emulations of some Fender amps and Marshall amps, which you can do in the unison section of those interfaces. If you don't have that, I mean, Waves makes a great set of guitar amp emulations. Avid has 11. There's all kinds of great, inexpensive amp sims. I would recommend that you mix and match some amplifiers in your. All you have to do is record a DI, and then you can audition a bunch of different amps sims. And if you want to use multiple amp sims, then just duplicate that one recorded DI signal and put it on. You can let's put it like you got the same recorded DI audio file, put it on 2 different tracks, put 2 different sims on there, and then balance those together. And maybe as a final touch, you you get one kind of good sounding amp and you put one microphone on it and you do a live recorded overdub layer with it. Or if you need a room sound, just put, if you need a room sound as a layer, use a real amp and do it. Or yeah, there's so much good stuff out there. And a lot of companies will let you demo their software. So, just try try a couple things, and I hope that helps. I mean, one is not necessarily superior to the other. What counts the most and what makes a record sound great is the quality of the song and the energy in which the production portrays the song. It's the sound, although, I mean, careers are built on sound. I mean, as an engineer, I would say that my ability to get a great sound has been a huge part of being successful as a engineer. But as a producer, I know that a great performance and a great song, just a really solid effort and something that conveys emotion and energy and will trump a sound, and that will make a mediocre sound great. No two records sound the same. If you were to identify your 5 favorite artists and pick a song from each one, or pick your 5 favorite records, doesn't matter the genre, and you listen to them back to back, side by side, make a comparison, I guarantee you they're all going to sound different. But what makes them all sound great is that you love them. It speaks to you. It translates something. So, I mean, there is no right or wrong. It's really about making sure that you get the excitement and emotion and intention. Do sounds help paint that picture and translate it? Yes, but a great performance will make a sound great. A great sound will not make a performance great. So I hope that resonates and you can kind of remember that as you go forward.
I think that'll be the last question for this Q&A section.
Okay, so a couple really quick things that we talked about: acoustic guitar and vocal. Tune often. Tune your guitar often. Make sure if your instrument has tuning keys on, and I'm not saying get in there and tune your piano. Leave that to a professional unless you really know what you're doing. But check your tuning often. You don't want to just kind of keep plowing away on getting down a performance of something, and your tuning slowly start to drift over many performances, and then you try to put things together, and you realize that the best take for the second chorus had a guitar that was not as in tune as it should be. Document your mic placements. Keep a journal. We've talked about these things, and make as many opportunities to evaluate your work away from your home studio as much as possible. Okay, so a couple little things. You're here on Recording Revolution. Graham has tons of great information. He is an awesome mentor and instructor. There's lots of things that you should watch and consume out there on YouTube. I mean, Pensado's Place is an opportunity to listen to a lot of great and accomplished people talk about music production and recording. Take everything just as an indicator of what you can do. Everything I've said to you is just the information that I have from the years that I've spent making records, and they're my opinions. They're well informed because I have a lot of experience and I have a proven track record, but they are not absolutes. They are not the only way to do things. You need to absorb as much information as you can and create your own place, your own style, and develop your own talents. Mick Guzowski is a really fabulous mixing engineer. I point out Mick because he has some great content on YouTube. He mixed the Daft Punk record that Lucky is on. There's a video that I saw not too long ago where he's talking about mixing funk and pop, or funk and I don't forget what it is, but the artist is Jacquire King. He gives sort of it's like an inside the mix, And the reason I point this out to you is you will see how that what Mick is doing in the mixing phase is pretty streamlined, pretty simple, something that's very approachable for you, and it also demonstrates that the artist Jamiroquai and the people that he recorded the record with, Mick did not record the record, he just mixed it. They made a very defined and production, and the tracks sound like the tracks. The recorded tracks sound like the intended finished result, and so Mick is not sitting there trying to reinvent the wheel. And another interesting point about that video is you can see the way a synthesizer bass was paired with a played electric bass. A great, study music history, read books, learn about old recording techniques, read about the way the Beatles did things. There's documentaries on YouTube about sort of behind the scenes of their career, where you get little glimpses in the studio. You can hear how some of the engineers achieved some things, the way that they dreamed up some of the effects when they had so little to work with. It kind of goes back to the Elvis example I gave you before, like just what they pulled off with so little. I mean, it's something you can relate to. It should inspire you and inform you about how you can be bold and make recordings when you don't have all these bells and whistles that I do. I mean, it's been a lifetime of collecting these things and a career, and me deciding what to keep and what to sell, and kind of getting to a place where I had a palette of sounds where I feel comfortable, like I've got a bunch of choices, but it's not necessary. Taking some of these older artists and record making experiences. Tom Dowd is a producer who was around in the 50s and 60s and 70s, even into the 80s, making records. Very inspirational to me, and hugely influential on recorded music. He has a documentary called Language of Music. Tom Dowd's no longer with us, but is really a really fantastic and educational watch. And I'm talking about music that may not even be your personal choice. But it's the more informed you are about different types of music and different production styles, the more you can borrow and give you food for thought. The Metallica Hardwired to Self-Destruct documentary is a very interesting watch, not only from sort of some technical standpoints and just sort of like how they go about writing and pre-producing a song. They're Metallica. They've sold over 100 million records. They have tons of money and tons of budget and tons of time. But it's interesting to watch their process. Watch them build up a recording like they workshop, like Lars and James they're workshopping a song idea and figuring out how to execute it. And but they're recording it as they go. They're in a really cool space. They have tons of pros and tons of gear. And then you see the bass player come in, and then you see Kirk Hammett come in to lay down guitar solos. You see the way that James lays down vocals. It may not be your cup of tea, but musically, but there's so much to be gained from it, and it's a totally behind the scenes thing that you can borrow a lot of knowledge from. I'm drawing a blank on the producer's name. Greg Fiddleman. You can watch how he interacts. The positive, the sort of the no nonsense sort of communication that he has, but he's not negative. There's a lot of positives. He's supportive and patient, and you can see him taking notes all the time. He's very organized, very meticulous. But it's a relaxed, very cool environment. There's tons of tutorials on YouTube about like electronic music. Ableton, they have lots of tutorials. There's a new masterclass app that you can buy and be subscribed to, and Deadmau5 has like a whole tutorial, like a masterclass on the way he produces music, and that's really, really cool. I mean, another EDM production website is called lynda.com. There's so much free content out there. I'm honored and very pleased that you came here, and you're spending this time with me to sort of have me get the knowledge, to get me to share the knowledge I have with you. But even all these things that I mentioned to you, I watch it too because I want to be inspired. I want to stretch my thinking. I want to see the way other people do things. As I've gotten more successful, I'm around fewer people that do what I do. I just talk to my friends about it, or I know how to listen to a record, discern things. I like inspiration. I like confirmation, the way I'm thinking about doing things and executing things that other people do it. I like to see the way other people do things. There's just so much information out there. To me, that's a big tip. Take in, view, read as much stuff as possible. I think, I have talked about technical stuff, but I've also sort of talked about a framework of how to approach this for yourself and achieve some results. There's so much information out there. You can look up a YouTube about how to use an 1176 or how to EQ this or EQ that, or there's tons of opinions out there. Do not take any of it with as absolute, like the law, the only way to do it. I've given you a lot of good information, but I'm sure in the future there's something I could learn from you, and there's something probably I could learn from you now. And I hope that what I'm sharing with you informs you in a way that you can go out and be successful, and that maybe it's your video or your music that I'm listening to and I'm trying to figure out how you did it and take inspiration from it.